Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of the April Design Challenge. I'm going to preface this episode by saying that they're not all going to be bangers. What I mean by this is that I'm not particularly happy or proud of what I created here. I don't think it's awful, I don't think it's great, and obviously I'm recording this after I've already completed the build. Instead of redoing the day and making a completely new design, I'm keeping this in here because I think it's important to accept the builds you make that are less than perfect. Additionally, while I am going to be narrating over this build, as opposed to what I did in the previous episode, I'm going to do so in a more ad-libbing style. I don't have a script in front of me. I'm just going to be going off of what I remember, and it's a pretty simple build. So let's start, as always, by talking about the colors. When I generated the colors, I got a singular pink, which I'm very accustomed to working with now from my work on rose gold, along with a couple shades of gray, one which was almost tinted green, and of course the white, which I use in every single build. Now, what instantly came to mind is what I actually ended up making, which was a cherry blossom. I looked at the pink and I thought of cherry blossom leaves. I looked at the green-gray and I thought of the trunk of the tree, and it just seemed to make sense for me. But at the same time, I was incredibly tired on this day and I didn't want to actually make like detailed art of a cherry blossom because that just seems like way too much work for one day and was not something I was about to embark on. So my solution for this was to make like an excessively simplistic version of a cherry blossom and to fill up the background with more details. So as always, I got to designing on paper. I drew out first a actual cherry blossom, like if I were to make one in an art style, and then I worked on how to adapt it to a more simplistic modern style. So I decided that instead of doing curves, I would make it in completely square with a series of steps almost, forming the curve, the outline of the cherry blossom itself and of the trunk, which kind of works good for cherry blossoms too, because if you've ever seen the trunk of a cherry blossom, it almost looks geometric in the way it curves backwards and forwards and almost 90-degree angles all of a sudden, and the branches switch directions. So I thought that not only could I pull this off in the modern style and in simplistic modern at that, but I also could perhaps save myself a lot of time and make something unique that I hadn't really meddled with before. Without actually conceptualizing anything further, I moved into the editor, which is never a good idea, and this is what always leads to disaster, and I should have seen it coming. But you know, I was just wanted to get this build over with. Today I remember being incredibly tired, and I think I actually fall asleep halfway through the recording, which is kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. So I started by building up the shape of the background. I made it in the lightest light gray color, and I made it almost in like a squarish shape, which I thought would look kind of cool, and is a unique aspect ratio that I hadn't really meddled with much before. It almost looked like a postcard in a way. But immediately after doing this, I started working on the only aspect of the design that I actually had planned out, which was the cherry blossom itself. I started building up the actual foliage of the cherry blossom in the style that I mentioned before, with a series of geometric step-ups, and I started by making this with 90-degree corners, even though I knew I was going to eventually change these corners to be curved, just to get the general layout of the design down. And once I had done this, then I went back and changed all of the corners into a round corner to carry across that sleek modern feel that I wanted to accomplish. I also kind of wanted it to feel almost like a piece of art you might see in Japan. This idea was carried out further through my design of the actual branches and trunk, which is what I moved on to next. I basically did the same thing I did for the actual leaves of the cherry blossom, except this time they were far more straight and linear, and I just went off of what I had designed on my piece of paper. I always think it's really easy to make cherry blossoms have a lot of character, because naturally their trunks are just so bendy and wavy that it's kind of hard to make a cherry blossom not look somewhat unique. And so I hope that I at least succeeded in that. Once I was done with the base of the branches and trunk, I also added curves to the inside corners. And these curves were actually of a larger radius than the ones used on the corner, and that was purposeful. I felt like this carried across some sort of stylistic idea behind it. More specific than just saying stylistic. This was purposeful and kind of based off of some pop art I'd seen from Japan. I've never been to Japan, but I've seen images. Once I had the cherry blossom, I did not know really what to do next. So I decided to add some of the falling petals. And I started scattering these petals around in all kinds of different places, and I very quickly realized that this was not going to look good. With the sleek, simplistic, modern style that I had everywhere else, adding chaos in the form of these cherry blossom petals just didn't work. And I'm sure there's a proper way to execute this, but I couldn't find it. So for the time being, I just kind of moved them off to the side and would play around later with adding them back in, but I could never get it to look right. So those petals falling disappear forever. I'm not gonna lie to you. Next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to add a Japanese style sun, which is obviously just a circle, and I made that the pink color, similar to on their flag. And you often see this in a lot of Japanese art, and I just placed it in the top left corner. And I was starting to realize that this was way emptier than I'd hoped. And due to the lack of colors I had, and with every color being just like a slightly different shade of gray, I was not sure at all what I could even add. What I eventually settled on was adding one of those torii gates, one of those like Shinto shrines, which I built up in the slightly darker shade of gray in the background. And I think that I ended up making this look nice and also fit stylistically with what I had already previously built. But the problem simply was that there was not enough going on in the background. It was almost too simplistic. And despite the fact that I believe I executed the torii gate properly within the style, it simply didn't add enough to the scene. I decided, in order to compensate for this oversimplicity that I had been building in, to add another torii gate just to the left of the one I'd already built. And while this did help fill the space, it didn't really make up for the lack of detail, and I believe that carries through to the final product. At this point, I really didn't know what else to add. I basically had no colors to work with, is the problem here. Like, I couldn't add another shade to the background because there was no other shade to work with. So what I decided to do was to use the dark gray color that I still hadn't used for the text in the top right. And this was the text that would say 05-cherry alongside my name. I knew that I would need to design a custom font for this actual design because everything else was so rounded and I didn't have a font design that was rounded. So at first I got to work on making my own. This is actually where I fell asleep, I'm not gonna lie. I was making the K in Krypt and I just like zonked out. I woke back up and with fresh eyes, I realized that it looked awful, and so I scrapped it. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you just have to fall asleep and then look back at what you've already built and realize, well, that's shit. And that's basically what I did. And so I did what any good modern creator does when they need a font and they don't know where else to turn. And I went to Razian's font pack. So this font pack has bailed me out countless times. There are lots of great fonts in here. They're all mostly scalable, I'm pretty sure, although that doesn't matter since I have Better Edit. Better Edit automatically makes everything scalable, which is really nice. But despite that, it also is optimized very well. And so it's great for use in levels, and you see a lot of modern creators using these fonts. And so I subtly stole the font that fit the best with the actual style of my creation, spelled out 03-cherry because I'm an idiot and I accidentally put the wrong number in it first. Put it in the top right alongside my name, eventually fixing the number, but I think I do that later. And I took a step back and I looked at it and I thought to myself, wow, this is not the best thing I've ever made and I do not know how to fix it. So the last change I made on camera was adding a white light ray that kind of stretched across the background because I still hadn't used my white color, and so I basically made a diagonal beam of light stretching out from the sun almost, and I think it still kind of works. I'm not sure still about it. I'm still kind of unsure. And what I did not do and what I should have done is change the lighting of the torii gates in the background at these borders, which I didn't do. So the final result in this video doesn't look very great, but later off camera, I went back and actually changed this. And so that's what you guys will see in a second here whenever I eventually show you the final result. But before I do that, I'd just like to talk a bit about the importance of accepting whenever you make mistakes and how to grow from these mistakes. So while I wouldn't really consider this build a mistake per se, it certainly is not my best creation. To me, it feels more like a filler almost, like something just to check the box and get it over with because I was running out of inspiration on it, I was running out of time on it, and I just needed something that would work. But at the same time, I think these mistakes are something you can grow from, and so it's not really a wasted time or a wasted opportunity. It's really just a more valuable opportunity, to be honest. So what did I learn from this creation? Well, one, obviously I need to fully plan out things before I go in. I've always preached this, and yet I did not do it this time. I broke my own tenet here, and it came back to bite me. What else did I learn? I learned that whenever you have very few shades of color, that it's important to use them sparingly, because I instantly use my brightest and most like pronounced color, and I had nowhere else I could use it. It might have been better to come up with a less ambitious concept whenever I had such few colors. And so once again, that goes back to that planning stage, but also just overall awareness of how to use colors better. I also want to talk about things that I feel like I did well. I feel like I managed to pull off the style that I wanted to well, even if it is overly simplistic. And yeah, I mean, honestly, that's about all I did well. But you know, I'm gonna shut up now, and I'm just gonna show the final result with the edited shades on the Torii Gate. Alright, although this was not my best work, I appreciate you guys for watching, and you know, maybe you learned something in the process as well. You know, I'm not a perfect creator. I wouldn't even consider myself that good of a creator, and as such, there's something I can always take away and always learn. Even if I was the best creator in the game, which I'm not pretending to be, there's still something I could always learn and always take away from mistakes like these. But in the end, I still have a product that I feel like I can show and like demonstrate, and I'm not too upset by it. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And we'll be back next week for, well, I actually don't have a teaser for you this time because I'm not sure what it's going to be next week because I haven't built it yet. If I have it built by the time I upload this, it'll be in the description. Otherwise, until next time, I will see you guys later. And that's all I have for you today. Bye.